All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session titled Leveraging Technology, Telehealth, and Education to Prepare for the Future. My name is Natasha Manzanero, and I work at HRSA's Office for the Advancement of Telehealth, and I will be your moderator for today. Today we have three guest speakers from the University of New Hampshire's Telehealth Practice Center. First, we have Marguerite Corvini, who serves as their project director. Then we'll have Pamela Calmerton, who serves as a clinical associate professor, followed by Scott Valcourt, who is the co-director. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
Super, great. Thank you, Natasha. So just to make things interesting, as we start off this presentation, we're going to be in a different order than the way we were just introduced. And so I'll begin and start talking. I'm Scott Valcourt. I'm co-director of the UNH Telehealth Practice Center, and Marguerite Corvini will follow me. Lastly, Pam Calmerton will be the last speaker of our set that's coming in. So we want to talk at least to get you started, and we have to do the requisite disclaimers here that any information that we provide in today's session is purely for informational purposes. The UNH Telehealth Practice Center has no relevant financial interest, arrangement, or affiliation with any of the organizations related to commercial products or services that we may discuss in today's program, just so that you recognize that we truly are a university and focused on the interest of education and those pieces, and not here to pitch any particular product or service. So that's that piece. And so, like any good learning opportunity, we want to focus on the objectives. And so when we're done today, we hope that you will be able to explain the importance of the academic and community practice partnerships to support telehealth practice that'll be out there. We hope that you'll be able to identify the opportunities to strengthen the evidence base to support future use of telehealth, if that isn't something you haven't gotten involved yet already, and I have a feeling that you probably have. And lastly, we hope that when we're done, that you'll be able to describe the use of telehealth technology to support the student learning and professional development, or if that's something that you're interested in, that's certainly something that we'll be happy to help you out on and continue to look at post this session. So let me begin by kind of doing the requisite introduction of what is the University of New Hampshire Telehealth Practice Center. And so it's probably already gnawing at you, as it often does for me when I go to sessions like this. And the first question is the religious one. What's the difference between telemedicine and telehealth? And that's certainly one that we have engaged in New Hampshire quite extensively, because in New Hampshire, there are two very high research doctoral universities in the Carnegie classification. They are the University of New Hampshire and Dartmouth College. You've probably heard of them as well as us. And so between the two of us, Dartmouth College has Dartmouth Medical School. And a medical school is a great place where a telemedicine center of activity is taking place, and that is exactly what's going on at the Dartmouth Medical School. But the University of New Hampshire does not have a telehealth, does not have a medical school, and so our focus is on everything else that is not specifically focused on telemedicine, and thus that's telehealth. And so with that kind of definition between the two, we focus on the aspect of the telehealth piece, and so we look at the practice of telehealth, how we do that, where we go, and what is happening and should be happening in a rural state like New Hampshire, as well as elsewhere across the country, that this whole model could continually be used beyond our borders. And so the center's vision and mission is to be able to teach both the current and future generations that are coming forth in the academic world about telehealth and how to use it, what it is, what are the best practices associated with it, and where is it going, so that we are all prepared for the future. Future happening sometimes a little faster than we think it ought to be, or that we anticipated it would. The center was created less than a year ago, but I think we've done about 10 years worth of work just in the last 4 months of trying to make sure we support the community that we serve in New Hampshire, because they've been calling and we've been answering, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things in this session. So the center has a three-pronged integrated approach. We focus being obviously an academic institution, on student learning and training. That student learning, as you'll see shortly, is around the educational experience in degree and certificate programs, but it also has a training element that leads us towards how do we make sure those practitioners who are already in the field and are already interested and taking advantage of telepractice, telehealth, are able to do the things that they need to do and doing it in the best possible way to increase the benefit and value to their patients and clients. The second three-pronged integrated approach is community engagement. We want to make sure that the community that we're working with, be it students, faculty, practitioners, end users, and the extended community, which I'll talk about in a minute, are engaged and are utilizing the center as a resource for what they need to do relative to telehealth. And finally, we are also, being an academic research organization, looking at the research, the evaluation of telehealth, and of course the policy changes that should be introduced. And we are engaged with our policymakers here in New Hampshire to help make sure that telehealth is something that can continue to exist and to grow in our environment. So the stakeholders that we look at throughout the organization, besides the whole field, and you think about the allegory of the elephant, we really can't eat the whole elephant at one time. We've really got to do it one bite at a time. And so when we look at that, we break down who are all the stakeholders that we have. This becomes this group of stakeholders, and we really break them into two parts. The first part of stakeholders are those who have primary needs and primarily engage in the center that we have at the University of New Hampshire. Students, faculty, practitioners, and patients or end users. And each one has their own particular interests in mind. Students looking at training, looking at clinical placement opportunities. How can nursing students and occupational therapy students be in clinical areas that take advantage of telehealth? And service learning opportunities. What can they do that at the same time becomes opportunities for them to learn? Practitioners, of course, they're looking for the latest and greatest information about what is available, how they can continue to grow their practice and serve their clients as best as possible, and certainly training in a continuing enrollment type approach, as well as advanced graduate certificates and master's and doctoral programs are certainly part of that. But the practitioners, bringing them together, and you'll see some programs in our presentation momentarily that look at how do we share those best practices amongst the community, whether they be in New Hampshire only, or whether they expand to even greater spots than just within the borders of this state. The faculty, of course, are looking at applied research opportunities. How can they continue to grow their own scholarship and research work that they do? Can they design and test new protocols and look at new financial models and the technology that goes into the telehealth space and what that might look like, so that they are part of the advancing of the disciplines? And then the patients and end users, and we have a number already through many of the programs that we have in our existing College of Health and Human Services and in other departments, are able to bring patients and clients in to be able to address some of the needs that telehealth can help support them with, such as seniors, rural areas, folks who might be incarcerated, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic right now. And some of the specialty care areas that we already serve are around substance use disease and behavioral health, but they're growing. There are new areas now the center has been launched that are starting to look at, are there other patients or end users that we could serve through the center today? Then there's this secondary group that has a bunch of benefits that come out of the center, such as, of course, insurance companies, going from the right over to the left. They have a value that they're looking to try to provide in terms of cost savings through telehealth services. And of course, are there new products that they could offer that increases their product's reputation that telehealth can deliver, that in some cases may be just as good, if not better, than the in-person experience? And so insurance companies have some benefit to gain by working through a telehealth practice center, such as the one that we have in New Hampshire. Technology companies are always contacting, and this morning we had another company contacting us to talk about how they can bring their equipment into the laboratory and into the telehealth practice center so they can deploy some of these new technologies, allow our students to test them, to look at what works, what doesn't work, how do they integrate with other products that are already in the field, to interoperate. How do those new technologies address some of the needs that the telehealth community have and address some of the best practices that they're looking to try to employ. And then, of course, by having students use them, as in many opportunities in the technological space that I've grown up in, when the students have the chance to play with it in the laboratory, in the classroom, and they graduate and they move on into the professional field, they look around and say, I had this wonderful device available to me in the academic world. How come it's not here now that I'm out in the field? And of course, technology companies are happy to make new sales that way. And so those are some ways in which they have a benefit to gain through working with our telehealth practice center. Policymakers are looking for a trusted source of information on some of the future policies that are involved in the use of telehealth. And prior to the COVID-19 environment, in New Hampshire, there were a number of bills that were being introduced to look at how can a telehealth or a telemedicine type service delivery be qualified for reimbursement through the Medicaid process? And how does the federal Medicare program take advantage of that? And how does that trickle down into the state environments? And what are the right policies that need to change to support that? And we were constantly, and still are, asked to weigh in on what are the best directions that should be put in place, what are the things that need to be considered, and even from a technological standpoint, where does broadband exist and where does it not in the state of New Hampshire, so that if we are trying to serve our community as policymakers, what are the policies we have to consider, knowing what the reality of the world environment might be. And of course, the university has a great deal to gain by creating this telehealth practice center, because we're attracting students and faculty in a tremendous way. Our nursing student population for the fall is greater than it's been in the past. The reputation of the university grows as the telehealth practice center is out there participating in press releases and press components. I think all three of us on your panel today have been involved in some sort of print or video or audio press event in the last 6 months since the center's been operational. And of course, the center has an opportunity for research and teaching that generates revenue and keeps this center continually moving forward and a resource that everybody has to gain. But if it were just these needs for these primary and secondary folks, the center would be a wonderful place. But we're discovering that there are these interwoven opportunities where students and faculty working together have some benefits to gain. Practitioners working with technology companies and policymakers have some opportunity to gain. And all these things can happen within the center. And that's where we're moving towards both now and towards the future, is how this interweaving and set of interconnections happen. Because our center has become one of the greatest examples of the multidisciplinary engagement that can happen within the higher education field. Higher ed is no different than many of the commercial spaces where we can tend to be very siloed. But here in the center, we've made it primarily a factor of our design to not be siloed, so that we can have this kind of interconnection play. And as a result, we have a host of disciplines from a number of colleges and schools across the University of New Hampshire that are involved in the center right now, and more starting to grow towards it, because there are these opportunities where alone, and this happens even in the field, alone technologists who are deploying equipment in the telehealth space, if they are making the decisions about telehealth by themselves, they're doing their community a disservice. Just as if the community, the health community, is making decisions about what telehealth equipment and services should be deployed, they are also making a disservice to their community. It's hand in glove. It's those two groups working together along with others that look towards these telehealth solutions that come to realize that there are these synergies. There's understanding the pieces between each other that we need to know. help us to really make sure telehealth is being delivered the best possible way and for the best community service that we can offer. And so these disciplines are involved, and there are others. And really the telehealth piece, besides the practical components that we would see in, say, the College of Health and Human Services or in life sciences and agriculture, we also see our College of Engineering and Physical Sciences playing a role, because there are many different technology tools that are part of telehealth. Right now, all of us are using a number of tools just to deliver this. Maybe you could call this a good example of a telehealth training experience. We are all using a number of tools right now. We're using platforms that allow us to take our voice and video and communicate that through our computational tools. We're able to do the networks that are connecting us all together in both our individual locations and across the multiple sites that are all part of this particular session. And there's always the tools that might be brought in that then connect and add and enhance this environment. And so different vendors are producing different products. Some are best used in some places, some are best used in others. Some are designed to be competitors to each other, and some are designed to work in an ecosystem. But one of the things that we already have discovered as the telehealth marketplace is starting to grow and new entrants are coming in, especially in the last 4 months, under the pandemic situation, the efforts to standardize, to come up with the right ways to allow devices to communicate with each other, the interoperability that needs to happen in these areas is becoming a complete need, so that we can get to the point eventually with good standardization and good interoperability, this mass market, this commodity collection of telehealth devices that would allow you to go to your local grocery store or your local health store and purchase a product, bring it home, and it just works. It connects to your network. It connects to the practitioners that you work with, who are your primary care network, and ultimately deliver what you are looking for from a telehealth environment without having to have advanced degrees in technology in order to help yourself as a potential client or a developer or a user of this technology. So the center looks at how can we solve problems and what kind of entrepreneurship might be the next set of things that need to be created in order to help advance the community moving forward. So as I look at it, technology is great, and I'm a big technology proponent, but practice and how that technology gets used in the practice is the key. And that's where we want to make sure that our telehealth practice center is doing the right things and helping our community do the right things to integrate this technology that might be coming out left and right into the field. So, so as we look at the center, there are a number of these partnerships and activities that are taking place. And to talk a little bit more about the detail about those, I'm gonna ask my partner, Marguerite Corvini, to jump in and talk about these academic community partnerships with the technology in telehealth that we're using here at the UNH Telehealth Practice Center. Marguerite?
Thank you, Scott. So I hope after today's presentation, you will have some new ideas on how you as a medical practice, community provider, or academic institution may be able to leverage technologies to form partnerships with one another and learn together. So to that end, I'm going to briefly share information about our Project ECHO program and our USDA Distance Telemedicine Grant Award. And then I'm going to take a deeper dive into one of our other projects about telepresence robots. Next slide, Scott. So Project ECHO is a virtual education learning model developed out of the University of New Mexico, and it specifically was developed to help democratize medical knowledge. So the model has since expanded globally, and it's being used for other purposes now, such as training community providers. So at UNH, we became an ECHO hub, and ECHO stands for Extension for Community Healthcare Outcomes. And we launched our hub in 2018, and we now have about 4 different ECHO projects running, but today I'm going to focus on our first project that's now in its 2nd year, and that's our Medications for Addiction Treatment Program. And we also call it PACT-MAT, which is short for Partnership for Academic Clinical Telepractice, MAT. So this program is funded through SAMHSA, and it provides case-based distance learning for opioid use disorder treatment, with the purpose of supporting MAT curriculum for providers as well as nurse practitioner students. And to accomplish this goal, we've been able to modify our nursing curriculum and integrate nursing students right into the ECHO. And we were one of the first in the world to do this. And we estimate that we'll graduate about 50 students per year with the ability to become waivered. So this is a 3-year program, and some of the other additional successes of this program is that we had 33% of our practices return to the ECHO in our second cohort, which is running right now. And we continue to maintain an interdisciplinary model because that's important to us as the UNH Telehealth Practice Center. And we do this through our faculty and our practice sites and our evaluations with our ECHOs. We use an iterative quality improvement PDSA cycle in order to advance the learning model. So we're constantly checking and making sure that we are having a best practice with our ECHO and also maintaining fidelity to the model, even in this COVID time. And we've expanded to include community providers in our ECHOs because we think that's really important to bridge that gap. So some of the other successes I just want to mention for our first year is that we had 18 sites in various counties across New Hampshire that participated with 22 waived providers, community providers. We had 4 nursing faculty who during that process obtained their waivers. We had actually 15 sites, practices, in those 18 different site locations. And we had 64 nurse practitioners enrolled in our PACT-MET program. And here's a quote up on the screen that I wanted to share with all of you from one of our nurse practitioner students. And she just, in her quote, explains the benefits of the program, how it really opened her eyes to the courage and perseverance that it takes for an individual patient, client to remain in treatment and pursue recovery. And we also heard from students how important it is to be exposed to this interdisciplinary learning experience. And as we move forward with our programming, we really are planning to incorporate more disciplines into our ECHO sessions and topics. We just had an ECHO last week and we had an OT student who participated. So that is the goal moving forward. So through the ECHOs we've been doing at UNH, we found it a wonderful way to develop these meaningful relationships with healthcare providers throughout New Hampshire and enrich the learning of our students. So Scott, I'm gonna ask you to go to the next slide, and I'm gonna circle back to Project ECHO as I talk about the USDA grant award we received and how we've been able to leverage both of these projects and the models and the technology. So in 2018, we received the USDA Distance Learning Telemedicine Grant to partner with 3 agencies in rural communities across New Hampshire. Now, I'm guessing some of you have heard of this grant and have even applied for it yourself and may have received it. But for those of you who have not, I'm going to just pause here and ask Scott to explain what the funds from a grant like this can be used for, because when we approached our partners to apply for these grants, they sometimes will pause and say, well, I don't really need a telemedicine card. I'm not really doing telemedicine. So I just want Scott to explain that it can be used for a broad array of products. Scott?
Yeah, so the Distance Learning Telemedicine Grant is part of the Rural Utility Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And this grant program, so rural is key. It focuses on making sure that there are opportunities to bring distance learning or telemedicine equipment into rural parts of the United States. It is a reimbursement program for equipment only. So there's no funding for personnel. There's no funding for travel or any of those sorts of things. It's strictly on an equipment only basis. And the reimbursement is generally, has now been changed so that it's a 85% reimbursement of equipment that needs to be primarily near 100% utilized for the purpose of either distance learning or telemedicine. And so and that's a pretty broad opportunity. A number of the places that we work with, they will bring in video conferencing equipment in order to have some kind of training around telehealth or telemedicine. The distance learning component allows them to be able to bring various programs to people across the rural region so that they don't have to travel as far to participate in something. Even on the slide you see here, you see the North Country Health Consortium has a number of programs that are displayed on their website, and a number of those all participate through one of the pieces of equipment that was acquired through the USDA Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant. There was there annually is a program of this that typically comes out as part of the USDA's annual Farm Bill. That program has already been done, and those applications were due back in April. But courtesy of the CARES Act, there's a second window that's open, and you see on the right-hand side, there's the picture of the application window that says you have until July 13th in order to apply in the second application window for the USDA Rural Utility Service Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant. And so the link at the bottom of the screen, and we're happy to give those to you if you don't necessarily pull down the slides in this set. You can see and link to that, and that will get you right to the page. And you still got time. You can still write a grant and take advantage of this program.
Yeah, so the North Country Health Consortium serves approximately 86,000 people, and the average travel distance from most towns to available sources of healthcare for low-income families is about 25 miles or more away. So through this grant award, we've been able to build them a high-tech secure Zoom room for the purpose of students in those rural locations being able to access that technology. So we have both social work and nursing students who are in that area. As well as local healthcare providers. So the local hospital and practices can utilize a space for Project Echoes, as well as other needs that they may have technologically. We know that they did not have the appropriate technology in their particular facilities. So this became a hub now for the North Country. So this is an example of how leveraging these funds to assist our partners is really a win-win for all parties involved, academic, medical institutions, and communities. So I encourage you to think about what technology you need and how you can use it to provide better care or teaching and learning experiences. And with that, we are gonna put a poll up. So as we go into this next session, I want to take a virtual pulse on the room, so to speak, and have everybody weigh in so I can understand where you're at in terms of telepresence robots. Have you heard of a telepresence robot? So yes, I've heard of a telepresence robot and I've actually used one. I've heard of a telepresence robot before, but never used one. And then what is a telepresence robot? So Scott is monitoring this poll right now, and he's going to tell us when the majority of you have weighed in and then share the results.
There's still some numbers coming in. We're almost quiesced.
Thanks, everybody.
Looking again. All right, looking good. So
another, what is a telepresence robot? Okay, let's see the results.
Let me share the results here with everybody. So let's figure out where I do that. I do that.
Heard, never used, from Dr. Milletz. Hope I pronounced that correct.
There we go. So,
hey.
So yeah, it's the numbers look pretty substantial. In they don't even know what a half the group here, about half the group doesn't even know what a telepresence robot is, and we've got a good number that they know about it, but they've never used one. And I am quite certain that the 4 that are in there, there's probably only one person who has actually used it amongst our audience, because I think we, in testing it out, who have used one, were the ones who probably clicked in more those 3 items out of the 4. So we're talking some new folks to this. So,
well, I hope to hear from that person who has used it when we get to the Q&A. So if you could go to the next slide, Scott. Thanks for driving today.
My pleasure. Just like the robot.
There's a mix of you using them and not using them, and I'm going to start with some basic information and then go into more detail about a few different projects. And I encourage you to think about how you might see yourself or your organization using a telepresence robot, and maybe you'll get some new ideas today. So the first question I usually get is, what's so great about a telepresence robot? Why would I use this instead of a regular Zoom option or a Doxy.me? And the answer is really in what you're going to use it for. I mean, it's not for everything. You have to make that choice. But for example, if you are using it because you want to bring a specialist in, I would say that it provides the specialist the ability to feel like they're in the room, and it gives them mobility to move around the room, go from room to room with you. So it has a little more capacity than a smart device or a stationary computer. It's also a great tool for programming, which I'll explain in a moment. And of course, it has many uses during a pandemic, which we're experiencing right now. So as an interdisciplinary center for learning and innovation, we began testing the robots last year with funding from our Advanced Nursing Education Workforce, a new through HRSA grant. And we decided to test an array of robots at different price ranges. And these are the 3 models we chose to test, and they range anywhere from $600 and up. And really, if you want to spend as much money as you want on a robot, you can. But we stopped at $6,000. So they each have their strengths and weaknesses. For instance, the QB-Bot, which actually I have a little QB-Bot right here. This is on the low end of the models, as you can imagine. And what it has is an iPad that's on a stand, and the stand has Bluetooth capability. So the provider can be anywhere in the building or at home and using the QB app on the iPad, and they rotate the QB around 360 degrees. So it can be on a tabletop, it can be on a medicine cart, it's very portable. But the downside is that somebody has to move it from room to room for the specialist or the person that's utilizing it. So the OmniBot is the one in the center, and that's at a little bit higher of a price point. That's from around $2,000 to $3,000. It's completely mobile. You can operate it from the comfort of your home or your office and feel like you're in the room. It has a built-in tablet that runs on the Omni operating system, and it can be started remotely. So, but a downside to this one is if you want to have multiple users, it does require you have an external platform like Zoom or Doxy.me. So the double robot on the right, where you see Pam, she and I were presenting on it a few months ago, pre-COVID. It's much like the Omni, however, the double can have up to 5 users on its own double application. So I'm just gonna say that I recommend if you do enter into using a telepresence robot, make sure that you talk with your compliance officers and you always get a BAA, a business associates agreement if possible, just to keep everything confidential and HIPAA, under the HIPAA rules. So we had plans for all of these robots, as we like to call them, our fleet. But then, like all of you, we had to pivot when COVID hit. And what we wanted to do was get them out in the community where they could be used by providers so that they could assist patients and clients. So with that, we stood up very quickly our telepractice loaner program. So if you could go to the next slide, Scott.
If I could just interject, I think Marguerite forgot to mention that we have no interest in Kubi, Omni, or the
yes. Thank you, Pam.
Welcome.
So the first 2 robots, one double and one Omni, were sent out to 2 FQHC locations and used for COVID screening, acute care, as well as medications for addiction treatment with patients. The robots have enabled providers to be at their home or their office and utilize robots for health safety precautions. We did have one robot that was waiting in the wings to go to a surge site. And I think it would have worked very well at a surge site, but the surge site was not needed. But however, maybe in the future. So you can go to the next slide, Scott. One of our Omnis is now being used by a practice site for precepting, and that's like training a student with nursing students. And you can see on the map on the right that we have several students in rural locations throughout New Hampshire. So that makes it a challenge, especially in this COVID era, for the preceptors to be physically on site and observing the clinical practice. So the robots enable the preceptors to stay home or in the other office in another location while working with these students. So along with this, we've also created a telepresence precepting module and a handbook for preceptors to transition into the mode of precepting. And we plan to scale this program up to include social workers and OTs and other disciplines within our center. So Scott, if you can go to the next slide, please. So our last self-driving robot has recently been placed at Easter Seals in New Hampshire. And Easter Seals provides services such as early intervention, medical rehab, vocational rehab, substance use services, and senior services. And they serve around 27,000 individuals across New Hampshire. For this project, we chose to focus on their adult day program and help them combat social isolation. They're seeing a lot of their older adult population experiencing this. And so we're working with them to have students from various disciplines utilize the robots with their participants. For example, our OT student will go into the adult day and use the robot to engage a group in an OT session. Nursing students might also use the robot to provide health education opportunities, such as a diabetes prevention group. And we're taking a phased approach to this work, but at every stage, we're incorporating students from these different disciplines. So the staged approach starts first with, currently there are no participants in the adult day program physically, obviously because of COVID. They will be using the robot to zoom in these participants and reacquaint them with the facility and the staff. So they'll be doing some programming with them, such as recreation management or social groups. And the goal is to decrease their social isolation and engage them in the adult day community once again. Then the next step, once the adult day reopens, is the robot will be used with frail elderly who are more at risk and may not be able to attend and be coming in to the adult day. And these individuals will join the adult day by a simple Zoom, click on the link, and then they're in there, and the staff drives the robot for them and goes to the different groups with them. And this will enable these individuals to attend the groups and be part of the community, even though they're not physically able to attend anymore. And lastly, the robot is just fun. I'm telling you, people, it brings a smile to people's faces. They get a kick out of it. They find it funny. Some people find it creepy. But we have been having a conversation about how this will be a conversation piece for the adult day and potentially stimulating for these older adults, especially as they transition back into the adult day program and they've had the experience of being on the other end of the robot from their homes. So that is just a real snapshot about those projects and the telepresence robots, and I'll be here for Q&A if you have more questions about them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pam, who will be talking about our telehealth curriculum. Pam?
Thank you, Marguerite. So yes, as Natasha mentioned, I'm a full-time clinical associate professor in nursing. I'm also the co-lead for the UNH Telehealth Practice Center curriculum and student learning as part of the three-pronged approach that Scott mentioned. So in 2017, we developed a course that was created for all University of New Hampshire students. We did not want to limit it to a particular major or a particular level. So graduate or undergraduate, any major could take this cross-listed special topics course as a foundational course, Introduction to Telehealth. And so this is a 4-credit course that's offered through EUNH as an online course, 100% online. And from the beginning, we had an interdisciplinary drive and focus. So within this 8-week course, we had faculty from communication sciences and disorders, from nursing, from health management policy, occupational therapy, social work, which really brought I think, an enriched perspective on using telehealth in all of the areas. And, you know, the faculty were able to contribute their individual strengths to the modules. So to date, the course has been offered in the fall and the spring semesters for the past 2 years. So next slide, if you don't mind, Scott. So an example of one of our modules, this is a sample module, including telepresence during a telehealth encounter and focusing on an introduction to what is telepresence etiquette. And so we focus on the patient and their needs. And for instance, if it's a nursing student, try to convey to them that you still need to establish rapport, active listening, empathy, what is important to them. We start off with this is protected health information. So we are asking for name and date of birth, using patient-centered communication and the teach-back methods or closed-loop communication. Then we also, in this module, would discuss the, the technical issues, the live feedback video, what is important in the background, that the background should be relatively plain. My background, one of the reasons I have this set here, rather than viewing any of the pictures on my wall or anything, is that, that's something that's really stressed as background. Your appearance, that you should still be professional. So for instance, in the pictures, you see that the students are, the student on the left is an NP student, he's wearing his lab coat. And then gaze and framing. This is the one that I frequently struggle with because I tend to look at the slides instead of my camera, which is at the top of my laptop. But so just to have them appreciate that those things are very important. And so that's an example of a sample module. Next slide, please. So here are some statistics about the course so far. I'm first going to look at the level of the student. And so you can see that the majority is represented by the undergraduate students in our bachelor programs. And then we also have been fortunate enough to have 9 graduate students in a master's program and 5 graduate students in a doctoral program. So for instance, the bachelor program, which you'll see on the next slide, we have representation throughout UNH, depending on the major, and in one case, an undeclared student. The graduate students, we've had Master's Social Work, the FNP program that we mentioned, the Master's in Nursing, and then we've also had 5 Doctorate of Nursing Practice students. So the next slide, if you don't mind. Then here's a little perspective on our statistics regarding the major. And so the largest group is noted with the nursing major. And as I just mentioned, we've had undergraduate baccalaureate students in nursing, FNP students, and then the Doctorate of Nursing Practice. One of the reasons for, in my mind, for why we've had so many nursing students, Marguerite mentioned the North Country Health Consortium. They have a program called the Live, Learn, and Play program. And so what we've done at the University of New Hampshire is that we've given an opportunity for senior nursing students to conduct their immersion practicum their senior year in the North Country. And so to prepare them for having their practicum in the North Country, we felt it was important for them to take the Intro to Telehealth course to kind of set the foundation for some of the technology that they would see as a way to leverage the use of telehealth. So to date, we've had 11 baccalaureate nursing students that have participated in the Live, Learn, and Play program as part of the North Country Health Consortium. And as Marguerite mentioned, that's also an opportunity for other disciplines as well. Now, so then you also see 16 communication science and disorders students. We do have a really robust counseling program through CSD. So the students are very interested in that. 9 HMP students, 3 social work, as I mentioned. And so the first 4 are in the College of Health and Human Services, but I'd like to point out that public health, psychology, business, those are not part of the College of Health and Human Services, which is important to us because it says that, this is something that's represents an importance for other majors. The first time I taught the course and I had a business major student, an undergraduate business major, she sent me a private email and said, I don't know that this is right for me. I was really interested in this, but I feel that everyone else has some healthcare perspective that I don't. And I encouraged her to stay in the course. And it was fabulous because she looked at the telehealth from her business lens, and through discussion board posts and the deliverables within the course was really able to contribute very meaningfully to the overall appreciation for the utility of telehealth, which I thought was really, really interesting. So next slide, please, if you don't mind. So our future plans, we do have the Introduction to Telehealth course, and as I mentioned, that's been in place now for 2 years and going very well. We do have plans to develop a practicum course using the TPC and using some of the equipment and technology that Scott and Marguerite have both mentioned. As an example, we have a collaboration now within the nursing department. The family nurse practitioner program director is working with the direct entry masters in nursing program, and we're going to have a telehealth encounter with the family nurse practitioner student in the primary care provider role, while the DEMON student is in the registered nurse role, and then an undergraduate in the simulated patient role, to really use the technology to conduct a telehealth encounter. And then we also have plans to develop a practicum course with those community partners, the academic clinical practice partnership model. An example of that, Marguerite and I approached a nurse in a heart failure telemonitoring practice to see whether we could have students that would be able to actually complete their practicum hours in that setting. But it's not just siloed into the 3 courses. As mentioned, this is a process. And so we have little curricular threads throughout a lot of our different programs right now. Future plans, we also have the Project ECHO that Marguerite mentioned, but we also have plans to develop primary care provider online CME modules. Personally, I feel that the push from COVID caught a lot of primary care providers kind of off balance a little bit on how to effectively use telehealth. And so we feel that that might be a gap that UNH could address in the future. Next slide, please. And so then finally, we would just like to talk a little bit about the research opportunities to strengthen the evidence base for the utilization of telehealth. As Scott mentioned, we are a R1 Carnegie classification for research. And so UNH researchers enjoy that ongoing commitment to research and scholarship as part of that classification. And despite not having a medical school, we do have a proven record for educating future healthcare workforce for the region. So the last component of that is our faculty. And these are some sample research interests from our TPC faculty research endeavors, all with a commonality of a focus on the use of healthcare information technology. For example, the bullet second from the bottom, e-health readiness and inequity among older adults in New Hampshire. That is a study that's the aim is to assess e-health readiness and e-health equity with a focus on 3 different types of senior housing, including subsidized senior housing, retirement communities, continuing care retirement communities, to allow us to compare the impact of residential environments on e-health. And then another example is the first bullet that's there, and the human technology interaction and implementation of information communication technology to support aging in place. Next slide, please. So this last slide shows Dr. Sajay Arthanat in the picture to the left. He's the gentleman in the blue. He is in the home demonstration room of our telehealth practice center. Dr. Arthanat is one of our directors, has 15 years of experience in research on the human technology interaction. And so using his expertise, we plan to go forward with a lot of our research opportunities, again, to expand the evidence base in telehealth. So then the next question, I guess the next slide would be any questions.
Awesome. Well, Scott, Marguerite, Pamela, thank you so much for your presentations today. We're going to go ahead and answer the questions that we received both in the Zoom and within the app. So the first popular question was, expanded telehealth rules in COVID has led to interest in audio-only services, but it's hard to find best practices since those weren't common before. Are you planning anything specific to using audio only? Seen any good work others are doing?
Anyone want to tackle that one?
Well, I will say it was at the Northeast Telehealth Resource Center conference last year in Portland, Maine that I went to. There was a presenter who worked in upstate New York and in Vermont with as a geriatric practitioner. And the initial fear or the initial question was, would patients of advanced age have any desire or interest in participating in receiving their services through telehealth means? And what he found was that not only did they like it, but there was a big benefit for those who are hard of hearing, rather than what we sometimes do is we simply set up our laptops or computers to use the ambient speakers and microphone that might be in the system and just openly talk that way. He found that if they were able to wear headphones and then they were able to control the volume on the headphones, they could actually hear the practitioner working with them using telehealth much better than when they were in person. And so that audio only opportunity was a wake-up call to say, you know what, when you have hard of hearing folks, finding ways to augment or support whatever their needs might be is a pretty good use of why telehealth is in some cases better than being in person. And so that's the only best anecdote that I've seen about how utilizing audio is a best practice. Use a headphone, and you'll notice I'm wearing a headphone, and I always typically do that for my meetings, not because I'm in the basement, so there's nobody here but me. Not that I'm trying to avoid the noise of the people around me, but I want to be able to hear well. And so I put the earphones on, and then I use the ambient microphone that's coming in off my computer to be able to speak, and hopefully you can hear me well.
I'll just add that we have a few agencies like NAMI New Hampshire and ServiceLink, which is our ADRC, who are really only doing telephonic with a lot of their clients. So those aren't examples of a medical practice, but I will circle back with them and see if they have any best practice tips to share.
Great. So the next question is, are you finding or thinking that the urgency, such as the COVID pandemic, has instigated an opportunistic technological tsunami, which precedes standards, holism, integrated protocols, best utility, ethical interoperabilities, which may create chaos as opposed to consensus and that word?
I would agree. I think that, we have been pushed into something that's long overdue, in my opinion, but, having attended this conference for years, and I realized that would be preaching to the choir, that this is long overdue, the use of telehealth. And so this urgency, yes, I think has pushed a lot of providers into using telehealth without knowledge of telepresence, without really knowledge of standards, et cetera. But I think they say, what is it, the chaos and opportunity, they're similar. So I prefer to look at it as the opportunity.
I have a saying that goes, in confusion there is profit, but I live in the nonprofit world, so I don't usually capitalize on my little saying, but that is exactly it. I think that in both ways. I mean, yes, there's probably the sense, as Pam was saying, by pushing the providers into this world without really having all the mechanisms and structures and understanding all in place, there's a bit of maybe some unpreparedness there. But I also am seeing that as a result of it, there's a whole lot more conversation and opportunity and an openness and willingness to say, okay, now that we are living in it and this is what was gonna be here to stay, now let's figure out how do we make sure we're doing it the right way. And so there's a lot more openness to even going down that road, whereas as Pam was mentioning, but prior to that, yeah, we're preaching a lot. The soapbox is on the counter, on the corner of the marketplace, and we're standing on it and we're preaching, but nobody was really listening. Now it's the other way around.
Yeah, and I would add one thing that we're saying right now to all the practices and providers we work with is we understand the emergency orders are out there and that you can utilize FaceTime or whatever platform you want. But we're encouraging everyone to be forward thinking about what's coming down the line and be having conversation with your colleagues and your compliance officers about what you need to be standing up in the future in order to meet those requirements. So it's important to be thinking about all of that as you go forward, because we will all have to pivot once again when things shift.
Great. And the next two are just comments that I think audience members wanted to share that they've used the telepresence robots during previous occupations, academic, not healthcare. The double was great for virtual presence in the classroom, and it could be used as a great solution for uses of COVID or other infectious disease situations, so providers or other teleconference needs can occur without using PPE or increasing exposure. So any comments to that comment?
I would just say that I completely agree with that. And I'm really glad that two audience members have experience or know of use occurring. I think there is a lot of potential use for telepresence robots, and ones that we probably even haven't talked about today that I don't even know about. So thank you for sharing those comments.
And then lastly, we have Portsmouth Regional Hospital uses telepresence robots to bring clinicians into the ER and patient rooms.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that example. I think I wasn't aware that they're utilizing one, so that's awesome. And I hope that that gives others an idea of how it can be utilized with whether you're a practice or a community provider. I know of a local library that's using one. And we're trying to think of how we can partner with this library for individuals who may not have, broadband access. So I think there's a lot of opportunities.
So we have two additional questions and 1 minute, although I think we can answer both of these. So speaking of equity, the divide with literacy and access to electronic media exists now. Will all this technological influx exacerbate equity to those most in need?
I certainly hope so. It was one of the first things that I was saying when we entered into the world of work from home, stay at home orders and things of that nature, was that the need for broadband and digital connectivity is going to hopefully take center stage as we look towards reaching out to all areas and removing the digital equity inequities that exist across the country and certainly across New Hampshire. And that is what we're starting to see now. And I think that we're still same thing as we saw in the last question. We're still preaching it. It hasn't changed our message. The issue though is that now the message is starting to come back, and there's been some move in that direction. So yes, I think there's still a ways to go, but a lot of the chaff that was in the way is preventing us from seeing the wheat has now been moved aside, and we can now see wheat fields ahead, and that's what we're working towards.
And like everyone who's at this conference today, we all appreciate the great digital divide, the issues with e-health literacy, health information technology, self-efficacy, access, all of these challenges. I feel that UNH is doing their part to try and educate the practitioners of the future and partner with our academic clinical partnerships to really try and address this.
Great, and I think we have time for the last question, Reed. I'll just go ahead and read it. Telehealth offers a fantastic opportunity to study the impact of different strategies for improving audibility for those with people with hearing loss. Is that research happening at UNH? If not, who at UNH should I contact about collaboration?
I would think that would probably be with our communication science disorders. I know they're involved a lot with the use of telecounseling, and you could certainly reach out. We could provide contact within that environment. Thank you.
We'd be happy to share your information and connect. We are always looking for collaboration. If there's anyone else on this call who has some budding idea, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Any research idea.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank the speakers and the Northeast Telehealth Resource Center and the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center for their collaboration today. Thank you all for joining today's session, and have a great rest of your day.
Great.
Oh, also, one other thing, don't forget to provide feedback within the app. There's a session feedback section where you can provide feedback on this app. And as a reminder, you can listen to the recorded sessions in the future. So thanks again.